So while that is coming up, I will do a quick intro. So Dr. Tayo Oyedeji is currently the CEO of Publicis Group, Redefining Nigeria. His professional background includes work in finance, marketing and management consulting in Africa, Europe, and North America. He was the regional managing director for Starcom in Africa, overseeing a personnel of over 750 people in 34 different countries. Dr. Tayo has a doctorate in business administration from the University of Missouri in Columbia and a master's in business administration from Oxford University. Dr. Tayo, it's a pleasure to have you. I know where you are right now is super early. I want to thank you again for taking time out to join us today, and I will cede the floor to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Oti. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. First of all, let me congratulate you guys. I know a lot of the members of the executives, and guys, if you're listening in, these are some of the very best digital marketing in all of Africa. I've been fortunate to work with digital marketers across multiple countries, and the names you see on the executives are some of the people that I mentioned wherever you are in the world when you're talking about digital marketing. So Oti, Shegun, everybody, I just want to say thanks so much. I think you guys are doing our country a service, but beyond our country, also doing our profession a service. So, God bless. I'm actually in the States, so this is about 4 a.m. my time, but I knew that I had to wake up to do this because this is extremely important. And let me also say that I don't think you brought me here to do a seminar on digital marketing because you guys know the day-to-day better than I do. But I'll tell you a bit about the history of our country in digital marketing, tell you a bit about how we can make it a true profession, and then talk briefly just also about how I see the future and the things that we need to do across board. My name is Tayo Oyedeji. I'm the CEO of Publicis Group. Publicis Group is the #1 advertising group in West Africa by far. So some of our agency brands include Insight Publicis, which is our flagship. We've got Media Perspective, which is our Starcom agency. We've got All Seasons Media, which is our Zenith agency. Leo Bonnet Lagos, which again is our American flagship agency. We've got Digitas. A lot of people don't know about Digitas, headed by Ose Oshundeko, which is our digital-only standalone agency, and also QMSL, Quadrant MSL, which is our PR agency. So across those 6 agencies, what we try to do is to help brands to be effective and successful at the things they do. So that's me, CEO at Insight Publicis. And what does it mean for our group to have that kind of capability? What it means is that we're able to take a brand, regardless of what it is, and help you through the entire customer journey. But that's not why you're here today. You're here because of ADMARP. So I'll focus on talking about digital marketing, what I know about it, which is not a lot, but and how I think that we can be more successful as a group. So I'll try to define what it is and what is not. I'll talk about our people and how we can get better people into the industry and how we can help our people be more successful. I'll talk about brands, the kinds of brands we should work with and how we should think about brands. Then I'll start talking about entry barriers, because that usually is the big problem in our industry. Every Tunde, Shola, and Kayode can one day start a digital agency and start prospecting clients. And I'll close by talking about work, which is something that's very dear to my heart, and how we should think about work. My goal is to spend about 30 minutes, because from my experience, I find that keynote speeches usually take too long. And so what I try to do whenever I'm invited to do this is to keep it short and sharp and to leave people with something, so that I just don't keep droning on and on and on and on and on and on. So if everybody is ready, let me just hear you on mute for a few minutes and bang on your table and say, yeah, we're good to go. So let's go.
Yes, we're good to go. If you could even do it in 20 minutes, that would even be fabulous.
Yes, we're good to go.
Thank you so much, guys. I ain't just like 5 people. What's going on? Everybody else, where are you guys?
It's a little controlled.
Yeah, we're good.
Oh, it's controlled. Okay, they're good to go.
Good to go, sir.
All right, God bless. Thank you. Okay, so Oti says 15 minutes may even be better. So I think I'll strive for that. Right, 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, good. I think when we think about digital marketing, the first thing is to understand what it is and what is not, right? And this definition I found really, really impactful and simple and clear because it sort of puts us in a good place. It's any marketing that uses electronic devices and can be used by marketing specialists to convey promotional messaging and, most importantly, measure its impact through the consumer journey. So what I'll do is, this is a lot of words. I'll try to break it down one by one and just kind of help us to understand what this is talking about. The first is that it's about marketing. It's about selling something. It doesn't have to be a product. It can be an idea, right? One of the most effective use of marketing I've ever seen in Nigeria was actually by the Peter Obi campaign, right? So they're not selling a product, they're selling a person, an idea. And all of a sudden, if you look across our digital spectrum in Nigeria, every single person is talking about this gentleman. Somebody did a study and showed that almost 87% of political conversations in Nigeria has a Peter Obi component. Now that is huge, right? So whoever is working for the gentleman has sort of done such a good job that all of a sudden the entire country is talking about this guy. So that's effective marketing. It doesn't even have to be paid, right? Because I don't think a lot of this is paid. He has organically been able to use marketing to sell the idea of himself as a candidate. The other part of it is that he uses electronic devices, right? Radio obviously is an electronic device, TV is an electronic device, but we sort of classified those two things as traditional media because I think in thinking through on electronics, to a large extent, a lot of it started in the late 80s and early 90s in terms of computers, cell phones, and all the other things that we know ever since then, right? And it can be used to convey a promotional message. Now, let me just stop right here, because a lot of times when we think about digital marketing, we think about it in terms of buying and platforms. So Shegun is here, we think about what we bought on Facebook, Google. 90% of the time when you talk to a lot of quote unquote digital media specialists, they'll tell you, I can buy you Google, I can buy you Facebook, I can buy you Twitter, I can buy Instagram, but that's not all there is to it. Some of the best marketing I've seen in the world in terms of digital marketing did not even have a marketing budget. If you think about Tesla, for instance, Tesla has never paid a dime for digital marketing, but it's intentional. So the intentional marketing of it was basically to use the founder as the basis for marketing, right? So Elon Musk, almost 100 million Twitter followers, is the core marketing strategy for all of Tesla. So they are not buying, but they are marketing, regardless of that. And some of the most effective direct to consumer marketers I know actually just use newsletters, but that's just use podcasts. And all of a sudden you see people build amazing brands without spending a dime on digital marketing. But it's the entire spectrum from paid to owned to earned that is important in terms of how we use promotional messages to reach people. I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, I was building a startup called Overwood. It was my very first Overwood investment. It's an investment firm. But it was my very first direct-to-consumer product, my first B2C product that I was building. But before that, I had built multiple other B2B tech businesses across the US and Nigeria. But in building Overwood, I was very strategic in one regard that we didn't have a lot of money to spend on marketing. And we're competing against big people like PiggyVest, like Carrywise, that had significant money from VCs. So they could literally just splatter their ads all over, right? So what we decided to do was that we would try the Tesla strategy, which is I would build an online audience and then sell to the community and then use the community to sort of promote the brand, right? The brand itself, people don't know because it's very silent. We've never spent a dime on digital marketing. But the brand itself has done over 4 billion naira in business, right? Just using direct to consumer rather than paid advertising to build it. I no longer run that brand because now I run Publicis. But again, that's an example of showing that it doesn't always have to be paid. It can be owned, it can be earned. Now, again, let me speak briefly. So I've talked about, of course, I didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about paid media because we all know what it is and we know how to use it. But owned media especially is extremely important. And I just don't see enough in it, especially for people, for brand, for agency leaders, like a lot of the people that are here, and I'm saying names that I know, people that I know that lead agencies in one form or the other, right? The number one way to monetize for an agency is paid media, because if you build a paid media for your client is dependent on you to run it in many ways, and you can also monetize effectively, right? But one of the most important part about paid media is that you can't get yanked off it, right? So I follow UFC, and I don't look like someone that follows UFC, but I find UFC, that's the ultimate fighting championship. I find it really compelling and interesting. There's a gentleman called Paddy Pemblington. I've never really pronounced his name, but it's called Paddy the Baddy. He's a gentleman from Liverpool. Right, so he had a fight a couple of weeks ago. It was his biggest fight to date, and it was big in that he won in a spectacular manner. But a day before that fight, Twitter banned his account, or Twitter suspended his account, right? So on Instagram, just as a result of that fight, he got 500,000 new followers, but he got 0 on Twitter because Twitter had suspended his account the day before. Again, if this guy had a really strong newsletter, those 500,000 people could have gone to his newsletter instead of to Twitter, and he wouldn't have lost all the audiences that wanted to connect with him just because of the fight and what he had done. And so the more we can transition our clients from paid to owned media, the better for us. Now, I already talked about Peter Obi in terms of earned media, because the guy himself daily talks, but he's been able to build a model that ensures that people are talking about him. And if you were to monetize how much people are talking about him in terms of earned media, what you find is that Peter Obi has spent the most by far without spending a dime in terms of political marketing in Nigeria. And so it is that entire spectrum that I want us to think about. And the final part of it is through your consumer journey, which is everything from how they get to meet you for the first time, you're raising awareness, to how they get to think about you, joining their consideration sets, how they get to take an action, and eventually how they get to buy from you, right? So how do we use digital marketing to influence people all the way across that spectrum? Let me speak briefly to digital marketing in Nigeria, because I find it really, really interesting. So I came back to Nigeria from Oxford in 2011, I think early 2011. And I was hired by another agency to start their digital marketing foray in Nigeria, Ghana, and Cameroon back in those days. And to a large extent, that was the third digital marketing firm in Nigeria. No, fourth, actually. I wouldn't count OutSource because OutSource wasn't doing too well, but the two big ones were Wild Fusion back in those days and Bite Size. And I think Bite Size is still here. No, it's literally dead, but a lot of the people that built it have moved to Nucleus, I believe. Right, and so it was literally a really, really virgin territory. And what I find interesting is some of the people that we hired back in those days are now agency leaders across multiple industries, across multiple different agencies. But what I found interesting in those days was that, again, just like now, there really wasn't a barrier to entry. So it was about how, not about technology cool you were, but how smart are you and what can we teach you, right? Because there was nothing like digital marketing really. We're literally building it from scratch. And so the question I ask again is that, so that was almost 12 years ago, but is it still the same today? That people still come in without knowing anything and then we have to teach them? If that is true, what structure do we have in place to teach them? And that now just takes me to people, right? What structure do we have in place to build this from something that people do to a true profession in the classic sense of it? I'll give you two examples. I joined, I believe, the second media agency in Nigeria back in those days in 2001. Another 10 years before I moved into digital, right? And I remembered when that agency started, there were obviously no media professionals in Nigeria. So you couldn't say, let's go hire a media professional, because we're starting from scratch. And the first thing we did, I remembered, right, was to say, how do we take this media thing that are just two agencies? The first agency actually is in our group, All Seasons Media, and the second was Media Rich. I was working for Media Rich back in those days. How do you then make this thing that are just two agencies that nobody knows about, and turn it into a profession? So the first thing we did was to set up a school where we could take people from other agencies that were trying to build a media discipline, that we could take people from our competitors and build them into true media professionals. So I remembered the course took place at Lagos Sheraton. It was sometime in 2001. And me and Dele was my colleague, we were both managers at Media Rich, brought the entire industry together to teach them how to do media planning, buying, and research. Think about that. Because the job at that time was not to grow our brand. The job at that time was to grow the entire franchise, to build an industry, to build a profession. Remember, this is what we tell our clients, that when you're the category leader, your job is not to cannibalize the category. It is not to find more people it is not to try and beat your competitors, because you're already on 56% of the market. Your job is to grow the pie, and when you grow the pie, naturally you get more of the pie than everybody else. And so my first challenge to ADMARP is that, guys, the job is simple. You have to build professionals. You have to have a really, really robust training program that people can come in, as back in those days, we used to say that, give us 3 months, we'll turn an animal into a media planner. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that's what we used to say, that give us any animal, and in 3 months, we'll turn that animal into a media planner. What we're saying was, people could literally come off the street, go through our training program, and suddenly become media specialists at the end of it. So that's the way to establish a profession. You put some sort of structure in place that ensures that, to a large extent, you can have people that are specialists in your field. I'll give an example. So my wife's an architect here in the US, and she always talks to me about the difference between architecture and the construction industry in the US. In the early 50s, architects in the US decided that we're going to make this a profession. Because back in those days, it wasn't a profession. Anybody could draw a building and all of a sudden you go build it. But after a while, buildings began to fall, right? You know, because a lot of skyscrapers were being built. I don't even think it was probably before the 50s, maybe like in the 30s. A lot of skyscrapers were being built in the US in the golden age of modernism. I think that's what it's called in architecture. So they said, well, we need to take this thing beyond something that people do and make it a true profession. So what they did was to form a group called AAA, right? Architect Association of America. The same way that you guys have formed ADMARP. And then what then became the norm was, unless you're certified by AAA, you couldn't practice as an architect in America. So you really could be the very best architect in Europe, right? But if you do come to America to try and build, to design a building, you need to have a AAA person on your board that then vouches for the building, right? So architecture became a profession. Construction is also quite important, because after the architect has done all the drawing and all that stuff, someone has to build it. What then happened around that time was that the construction industry did not do the same thing, right? And so today, what you have is architecture as a profession, construction as something that any human being can wake up and say, I do construction, I'm a constructor, I'm a project manager, I'm this, I'm that. right? So the question we want to ask is, do we want to move towards architecture, or do we want to move towards construction? And judging by the conversations in this room and the topic of the keynote, it's clear that the goal is to move towards construction. It is to set up a training program. It's to give people an opportunity to learn, and most importantly, it is to build a structure, a political structure that ensures that we establish a good industry across the board. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you guys, because you're full-time professionals. I'm not. I do a little bit above. I do creative, I do media, I do digital, I do the entire gamut of marketing communications. But as full professionals of the digital marketing, but I also understand digital marketing, and I've actually led a couple of digital marketing agencies. But as full professionals in the digital marketing space, the biggest problem you have is that nobody believes that it's a truly professional industry. Nobody believes, and I'm talking from the perspective of the brands, that there's a difference between working with, say, a top-tier digital agency like Digitas, or I don't know how big Nucleus is today, or Pulse, or whatever. That there's a difference between working with those versus working with Tunde from the street that says, I can buy digital, I can do this, I can do that. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. And so there's still a need to market the industry itself to brands as a specialist offering of some sort. And so we do this a lot for our clients. Our clients come to us and they say, we'd like to do blah, blah. And we say, this is what you must do to build awareness, or to build perception, or to do blah, blah. But quite often we fail to do it for ourselves. And so the question I'm asking is, what must we do as custodians of this industry to build the brand digital marketing to advertising buyers, so that they will see and understand that there's a difference between working with true professionals versus working with somebody from the street, right? So one of the things that happens in our industry quite often is that clients obviously chooses multiple players across different industries, right? And so sometimes I'm in a room that has creative, that has media, that has digital, that has blah, 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 blah. And I'm just going to be sincere with you guys. Sometimes I listen to the digital guys and I'm like, damn, there's nothing here. There's no substance here. And sometimes I listen to some, I'm like, damn, these guys are so good that it's amazing how good they are. But the question I'm asking is, what have we put in place to differentiate the quacks from the true doctors? Right? And how do we then sell that to the client? And I think ADMARP has to be the mark in many ways that sort of makes that difference. So that to me is the next thing that we need to think about if we're going to make this a truly professional industry. Now, entry barrier is what has led to a lot of these problems that we're talking about. So who can start a digital marketing firm? Who can run one? Who are the leaders, and all that stuff. So before I came back so I'd done marketing communications for quite a bit, but then I took a segue into finance, right? And before I came back into finance, one of the things before I came back into marketing communications, I remembered that we had to register a finance company license with CBN, right? And in that licensing process, guys, they were like the most difficult, or well, maybe not, don't use the word, but the most rigorous process that you can think about, including things like, how long have you worked in finance? What do you know? What have you done? What's your background? A background check. Did you do NYC? Just literally everything you can think about before the license was given. And when I think about MIPAN, which is the Media Independent Association, they've also started doing the same thing. They would have a full verification process before you are announced as a full member of MIPAN, right? Same thing with AAAN, right? They will do a full verification process before you are announced as a creative agency, right? And so on and on, we're finding that some of our contemporaries are beginning to professionalize their industry. It's not yet where it needs to be, but we're at the very beginning stage of it. And I think to a large extent, it's something that you guys have to think about as the owners of the industry in terms of digital marketing. Because if you don't make that distinction, if you don't have an entry barrier of some sort in place, both for people in terms of what they must know and learn before they join the industry, but also for firms in terms of who can start one, who must be the MD of the firm, what are the processes for choosing the right people to do that. We sort of have to think holistically across all the things. The biggest problem we usually have is politics, because people keep asking, how do we get this codified into, those are questions that OT, Shegun, and some of the leaders have to ask. How do we get this codified into AppCon? How do we get this entire process done? You see, as digital marketers, one of the things we do is we think beyond we think we're different from those people. We're not part of them. But unless we understand what is happening there and learn how to use them effectively for our things, we'll sort of be in trouble. So we have to think through on the politics of this entire thing. Let me tell you something that I'm proud of. It didn't work, but it was a very interesting process for me. So as you well know, a couple of years ago, I think it was 2017, I was the CEO of Publicis Media in South Africa, in Africa, which is all our agency groups across the continent. So in that space, I got to travel quite a bit, Kenya, South Africa, Mozambique, just a couple of all the countries, and we have offices in about 38 countries, right? So I got to travel quite a bit and got to work quite a bit with the people. And so you go to maybe a Rwanda, and there's no marketing practice. It's just anybody can wake up in the morning and do anything they want to do. And you go from that into maybe an Algeria or Kenya, and you see the quality of work in maybe a Kenya or Algeria. And all of a sudden, you find out that you can't just wake up today and all of a sudden call yourself a digital marketing firm or a media marketing firm or an advertising marketing firm. Because to a large extent, there are processes and procedures that have been put in place and codified into law that ensures that you must sort of be effective. After I left Publicis, I took some time off work just to clear my head and do a couple of things. So some of my former colleagues were going to start a digital marketing firm, and they offered me stakes in it and asked me to come, be part of the process, help them build it, help them think through on what to do and all that stuff. And I found this very, very compelling. When we were about to register that firm in South Africa, we couldn't do it because a lot of the shareholders were non-South Africans. And so we kept trying, and the board kept coming back, and the registration board kept saying, you must have a 51% holder that is South African, right? And so eventually we had to find a wonderful young lady that used to work at Ogilvy called, I won't mention her name, to then be the leading investor that was building this marketing agency. Why am I telling you this? We think that all this wala we don't need, but these walas that I'm talking about are the reasons that you have professional digital marketing firms in some industries, and in our market, it is just a wild, wild west. Literally everything goes. Why is this important? It's not because you want to stop people from doing it. It is because you want to get the right people in. You want to ensure that the quality of work that goes to clients is a lot better than what a lot of people say. I'll close with this, guys, and this is my favorite saying on work. I use this a lot whenever I speak across the world, because I think that, especially in Nigeria, I think that if we get this right to a large extent, we get to a place where we can build amazing things, because some of the smartest people in the world that I've seen are Nigerians. And you just find out that we're struggling as a country because some of these things are not the way we think about life. This is a saying that Martin Luther King Jr. uttered just before he died, a couple of weeks before he dies. And he says, if it falls to your lot to be a street sweeper, sweep streets like Michelangelo painted pictures. Sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry, like Beethoven composed music. Sweep streets so well that all the host of heaven and earth will have to pause and say, here lived a great sweeper who swept his job well. When I saw this, it struck a big chord in my heart, because this is what I believe. This is how I've tried to live my life. That whatever your hands find to do, do it well. It's the same with digital marketing. Wherever you are, wherever you work, whatever your hands finds to do, just do such an amazing work of it that even the people around you will say, damn, this guy did a really good job. Let me tell you about when I left Nigeria for America for the first time in 2003. I'd worked in Media Reach for 2 years then, right? And there's a reason I'm telling you this, because I think we learn more from stories and the lives of the people that have gone before us than just lectures and all that stuff. But this is my closing story. So 2 years later, I'd gone from just an executive to the manager of Guinness and Reckitt Benckiser. You know, I'd introduced more things to the market, done a couple of things for Reckitt Benckiser. So I was running that business and Guinness in Media Reach when I got admission to go study for my master's in the US. And I remember clearly that I was doing my job so well that the firm offered to pay 50% of my salary all through my master's degree in America, so that when I'm done with my master's, I will come back to the same firm to work. Guys, I'm telling you, the firm, the agency, paid 50% of my salary. They offered to pay it for 2 years, so that when I'm done with my work, with my master's, I'll come back to Nigeria. And when I come to Nigeria, I will work for them. They paid the first year, and then it became clear to me that I was going to do a PhD. So I called them and I said, stop. I'd like to refund the first year you've paid because I'm staying back on to do my PhD, blah, 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 blah. But they stopped and said, we're not going to collect that money back, because we want it to be such that anytime you return to this country, you come and work for us. Why? This is why. What I'm showing you. I was just a street sweeper back in those days. I wasn't a CEO, I wasn't anything. But I was doing my job so well that they were willing to pay for 2 years, even though I wasn't working at all, right? And 7 years later, I returned to Nigeria as Director of Business Development in the same firm. I didn't have to apply. They literally just said, anytime you're coming to Nigeria, a job is waiting for you. Why am I saying this? A lot of times, the reason that the work that comes out of us is not as good as it should be is because our people sometimes don't have this mentality. So in building this wonderful group, one of the things we have to do is to just show people that the quality of the work we do defines the industry. The quality of the work we do defines the people that are part of the industry. And perhaps more importantly, the quality of the work we do defines who we are as people. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate your time and efforts.